Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brodie Consulting Group. To get more information about our coaching, publishing, executive ghostwriting, and podcast production services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brodie, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. Today, we're being joined by Kristine Goad, author of Your Mileage May Vary. Kristine, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Are you ready to get started?
I am. Thank you.
All right. Question number one. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
Well, if you haven't started writing, I would say don't wait until you feel ready or like you feel like you know enough, because if you do that, you'll never get started. And if you are already writing, my advice is don't stop for anything. The hardest part for me, I was writing a memoir, and the hardest part for me was overcoming the who cares question. Who cares about my life, right? But that can attack anybody, and it can stop you. No matter what kind of book you're writing, it can stop you. And I think overcoming that who cares question is huge. And my advice is, you've probably already heard this, but my advice is to write for one person, someone who will, gladly devour your book simply because you wrote it, or the one person you know who is definitely in need of what you have to say. And let everyone else's voice just go away and just keep writing for that person, whether it's maybe even a younger version of yourself. But just write for one person and don't stop.
Yeah, my very first book was based a lot on my life, and it was called Eat Less and Move More, and it was about struggles with weight and going through my teaching career. And I was thinking, wow, who's going to read this? Well, I'm going to read it. And I know people that I know are going to read it because it's going to make that connection, because what we talked about was not only losing weight and keeping the weight off, but we were talking about the struggle and being really vulnerable and utilizing storytelling. And what I found is that was the most relatable way to actually write a book, because people want a story that they can connect to. And I think that's one of the most important things, is the storytelling and making that connection. And I think as long as you have that, then everything else takes care of itself.
Yeah, I think you're right. And the funny thing is, the more you make it about you, or the more detailed you make it, the more other people will see themselves in it. It sounds like you're writing about only you and nobody else could have ever experienced that, but that's not the case. Other people will immediately see themselves in your story.
Yeah, I agree with you completely, because that's how you relate. Because who's ever wanted to lose weight before? I've never known anyone that didn't want to drop a few pounds. And talking about that struggle, but also talking about when things go south, when you have a bad day, and maybe you had something you shouldn't have eaten, but then the next day it's like, hey, it's a new day. Now we're going to do it right. And I think that's something that people can really connect with, and just showing those struggles and vulnerabilities.
Right.
Well, what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published?
First, I think the hardest part is simply believing that it's possible for you. There are so many people who feel overwhelmed by the process and think they could never make it happen. And then the second part of it is believing in yourself and your book long enough to actually get through the process. Because whether you're looking for a traditional publisher or you're planning to self-publish, there's a process that has to be learned and hoops that have to be jumped through, and it's a long process, and there are a lot of doubts that can pop up and stop you along the way. So I think the hardest part is just believing in yourself and your project, and just knowing who you're writing for and why you're doing it, and keep plugging along.
Well, let's talk about marketing. So please share a marketing strategy that you have used in your book launch that worked well.
When I launched my book the first time, what I found was that my friends and my acquaintances were willing cheerleaders, and they happily shared it with other people and got me some early excitement. And I didn't really plan for that to happen. It just happened spontaneously and was very exciting. I'm getting ready to launch a second edition of the book because it's the 20th anniversary of the event that I wrote about. And I'm going to be a lot more strategic this time in actually going out and looking for friends and acquaintances in advance who will, be on board and know that this is coming down the pike and be willing to help me in advance. And I'm also preparing some content and some images and things like that that will make sharing the book easy and hopefully also fun.
Well, I think that's one of the main things is just having fun with it, because when you're having fun with a launch, with your business, it truly is contagious where it rubs off on other people.
Right. And they're excited. You think that, in your own head, you're thinking nobody's going to care that I'm doing this thing, but there are people in the world who want to help you succeed and who will be excited by what you're doing, and they'll raise their hand if you give them an opportunity to help you out.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the great strategies is just making those connections and being able to have that additional support. And it's so unique. So this is actually going to be the 20th anniversary of your book.
Well, it's the 20th anniversary of the event.
Oh, the event. Got it.
It was a cross-country bike trip, and it took me 2 years to write the book, and then another, oh my goodness, I want to say 7 or 8 before I actually had the courage to publish it. So it's not the 20th anniversary of the first edition, but it's the 20th anniversary of the bike ride, and I feel like I need to update the book with what it looks like 20 years later in my head, what that journey looks like.
Well, one of my favorite things about having a second edition too is essentially when you make the updates, Amazon will actually treat it as a brand new book. So you're actually able to essentially hit the reset button where the reviews will transfer over and the sales information will transfer over to the new edition, but they actually treat it as a brand new book. So it's almost like you get to do the whole book launch all over again, which can be a great opportunity.
Yes, and it's what I'm looking forward to this time, because I feel like I know more what I have a better idea what I'm doing, and I have a better vision for what I want the book to be. And I think it's great to hit that reset button. I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I actually did that early this year when my first publishing book called Book Publishing for Beginners. And what we did is we added new content, updated information, and a brand new book cover. And it was almost like having a new car, because it was such a cool experience being able to publish it and then having the second edition, and then also realizing that Amazon treats it just like a brand new book. So it's able to hit the algorithms again, you treat it like a new book launch, and it gets out to many more people.
Right. Yeah, that's what I'm hoping.
Well, let's talk about your favorite book. So what is your favorite book, and what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
I feel like that's an impossible question. There's been, a string of pivotal books in my life. But I think the one I'm going to choose is Cowboys Are My Weakness by Pam Houston. And I'm choosing that one because I was reading it at the time that I started to take my own writing seriously. And what I took from it at the time was that it's possible to make a life from adventure and writing. And what I take from it now is, or what I appreciate about it now, is that it shows you don't have to have it all figured out before you get started writing or putting together a book. That book was a collection of short stories. And I've watched all of her books come out since then. And it's pretty clear that every time she starts writing, she's figuring out the process from the beginning all over again. So it's just a really good reminder that it's always, I'm not sure that you can ever do, okay. I don't want, sorry.
No, you're fine. Take your time.
What I like about it is that she takes risks every time she starts a new book, and she's never on firm ground. And I think that's a really great model to work from, whether you're writing a book or starting a business or, whatever it is that you're doing in life, I think understanding that you're never really going to know what you're doing until you've done it is a really good, it's a good mindset to have.
And for a final question, what is your favorite quote and why?
My favorite quote is "Everything you've ever wanted is on the other side of fear" by George Adair. And it just seems to say it all. Nothing ventured, nothing gained kind of thing. You have to you have to feel the fear and do it anyway. So that's the quote that I've transferred from website to website as my favorite.
Well, Kristine, I want to thank you for being a guest on our show. What is the best way for people to find you online?
My website is KristineGoad.com, and it's pretty easy to find.
Well, Kristine, I want to thank you once again for being on the show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
I appreciate it, Paul. Thanks so much.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how you can be featured in our brand new Get Published business book, go to getpublishedpodcast.com.